Picture this, a room in Brussels, February 2026. Canada's Prime Minister signs a document, and in doing so, locks the United States out of the most consequential military financing program on the planet. 150 billion euros, submarines, cyber warfare, next-generation weapons development. And Canada, a North American country, is the only nation outside of Europe with full access to all of it. Not as an observer, not as a consultant, as a full participant. Meanwhile, American defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, companies that have treated Canada as a guaranteed customer for 70 years, locked out completely. The Pentagon didn't see it coming, Washington didn't see it coming. And here's the part that should stop you cold. This didn't happen despite Donald Trump's pressure on Canada. It happened because of it. This is the story of how the most reliable ally the United States ever had decided it was time to stop waiting for American reliability in return, and what that means for the future of NATO, Western defense, and the global balance of power. To understand what just happened, you need to understand a problem that has haunted European security for decades. Europe was weak, and Europe knew it. Not weak in population, not weak in economy, weak in the only way that matters when someone is pointing missiles at your border. Militarily dependent on America. Fighter jets? American. Missiles? American. Radar systems? Intelligence sharing? Ammunition stockpiles? American, American, American. Then, Russia invaded Ukraine. And suddenly, European countries discovered something terrifying. Their ammunition stockpiles ran out in weeks. Their defense factories had closed decades ago. Their entire military infrastructure assumed America would always be there to resupply them. That assumption was no longer safe. So, Europe designed a solution. They called it Security Action for Europe, SAFE. 150 billion euros in coordinated defense financing, but with a critical rule built in from day one. At least 65% of every component must be produced on European soil. This wasn't just an arms fund, it was a declaration. Europe was building a defense industrial base that didn't need American supply chains. Poland got 43.7 billion, Romania 16.6 billion, France and Hungary 16.2 billion each. Artillery shells, submarine technology, AI-enabled cyber warfare systems, all of it being manufactured inside Europe by European workers for European militaries. Every contract awarded under SAFE is a contract that cannot go to an American company. The United Kingdom tried to negotiate access. Australia opened talks. Even Japan showed interest. But one country got in first. One country got in fully. And it wasn't a European country at all. Let's talk about how Canada pulled this off, because the path in was not obvious. SAFE was designed for EU members. That 65% content rule was specifically meant to exclude outside nations and keep European money inside European economies. So how does Canada, a North American country with no EU membership, no euro, no seat at the European Council, end up as the only non-European state with full access? The answer starts in June 2025. That's when Prime Minister Mark Carney signed a broad security and defense partnership with the European Union. It covered cybersecurity, maritime surveillance, space security, and joint procurement frameworks. But that was the foundation, not the building. The real negotiations, the ones that mattered, happened over the next 6 months. Quiet, technical, focused on one specific question. Could Canada be admitted into SAFE itself? Those negotiations concluded in December 2025. The formal agreement was signed in February 2026. And the entrance fee? Defense Minister David McGuinty confirmed it was in the millions, not billions. Think about what that number tells you. If Europe was charging billions for access, Canada walks away or negotiates hard. Millions is a symbolic fee. It means Europe wasn't reluctantly letting Canada in. Europe wanted Canada inside that tent. And they had very specific reasons why. Canada brought things that European defense planners needed badly. Advanced Arctic maritime surveillance technology, cyber capabilities, critical mineral deposits essential for modern weapons electronics and batteries, and, most powerfully, a geopolitical signal. If Canada, America's closest neighbor, oldest ally, co-founder of NATO, was diversifying away from Washington, then the entire premise of American indispensability in Western defense was suddenly negotiable. Europe understood that value perfectly. Now, here's where the concrete consequences start hitting. Canada needs new submarines. The current fleet, Victoria-class boats purchased from the United Kingdom in the 1990s, is aging, expensive to maintain, and critically, cannot operate under Arctic ice. As the Northwest Passage becomes navigable year-round, that gap isn't strategic inconvenience, it's a sovereignty crisis. Canada needs new submarines urgently. The question was always, from whom? Before SAFE, the answer was probably American. U.S. defense companies assumed the contract was essentially theirs by default. NORAD compatibility, NATO interoperability, the path of least resistance, it all pointed toward buying American. SAFE changes the entire equation. France and Germany are jointly developing a next-generation submarine design right now. Under Canada's new SAFE membership, Canadian engineers can participate in that development from the ground floor. Canadian Arctic requirements get built in from the start. Technology gets transferred to Canadian shipyards. The submarine contract alone could be worth $20 to $30 billion. That's $20 to $30 billion that American shipbuilders will not see. And here's what makes this truly different from just buying foreign equipment. The intellectual property stays in Canada. When Canada buys American, America keeps the manufacturing knowledge. Canada gets the weapons, America keeps the capability to build more. Under SAFE joint development, Canadian engineers work alongside French and German engineers. Canadian workers build components. Canadian shipyards learn the systems. The knowledge doesn't leave. This isn't just procurement, it's industrial policy. And it extends far beyond submarines. Cyber warfare systems, AI-enabled electronic warfare networks, designed to integrate with European military infrastructure, not exclusively designed around American systems. McGuinty's language was deliberate. He didn't say Canada would buy what its allies need, he said Canada would build it. That word choice isn't accidental. It's a policy statement. Let's run the numbers, because they're significant. Canada spends approximately 15 billion Canadian dollars per year on defense. Historically, 75% of equipment purchases went to American companies. That's over $11 billion annually flowing to Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, companies that treated Canada as a captive, predictable market. Now model out a shift, even a 30% shift, moving roughly a third of procurement toward European suppliers through SAFE channels. That's $3 billion per year leaving American contractors. Over a decade, $30 billion in lost contracts. Factor in the submarine program's full life cycle, potentially $50 billion or more. And the downstream damage is worse than the headline number. American defense companies built entire supply chains assuming Canada buys American. Component manufacturers, maintenance contractors, training programs. All of that becomes less viable when the anchor customer changes direction. There's a multiplier effect running the other way too. Every Canadian success story using SAFE to build military capability outside the American industrial base is a case study other countries will study. Australia is already in talks with Europe. South Korea is exploring options. Japan is watching closely. The locked-out market could grow for a generation. Here's what all of this means for NATO, and this is the part that genuinely changes the architecture of Western defense. For 70 years, NATO has operated on a fundamental imbalance. America provides the overwhelming majority of actual military capability. European countries provide territory, political legitimacy, and some forces. That imbalance gave Washington leverage, enormous leverage. If European allies didn't align with American priorities on trade, on China, on anything, Washington could threaten to reduce its commitment to European defense. Trump didn't just hint at this, he made it explicit. He questioned publicly whether the U.S. should remain in NATO. He demanded Europeans pay more. He used the threat of American withdrawal as a negotiating tool across every domain. SAFE is Europe's structural answer to that leverage. If America is unreliable, Europe must be capable of defending itself without American support. That requires European weapons production, European ammunition stockpiles, European industrial capacity that doesn't depend on American resupply. Every euro that flows through SAFE makes that American leverage weaker. Canada's membership adds dimension that genuinely rattles Washington strategists. Canada is not a small Eastern European nation that joined NATO after the Cold War. Canada is a founding member. Canada has fought alongside the United States in every major conflict since World War II. Canada is geographically, culturally, economically intertwined with America in ways no European country is. And Canada is now building its military capability through European procurement channels. That sends a message to every other NATO member watching. You don't have to choose between NATO and reducing dependence on Washington. You can be a committed ally and still diversify your security relationships. Carney's own public framing made the message unmissable. He described the agreement as Canada and Europe elevating defense partnerships to rapidly procure new equipment, accelerate NATO targets, and catalyze opportunities for defense manufacturers. Notice what's absent from that language. No mention of American cooperation, no mention of American leadership. Just Canada and Europe building. Some analysts argue this weakens NATO by creating a European pillar that competes with American command. Others argue it strengthens NATO by making European members genuinely capable rather than permanently dependent. Both are probably true, but the directional shift is undeniable. NATO is becoming less American-dominated, and Canada has chosen which side of that balance to build toward. SAFE is not finished. It's barely started. The initial 150 billion euros is mostly allocated, but the European Union is already negotiating its next multi-year fiscal framework, potentially hundreds of billions more euros in defense financing over the following 5 years. Canada is positioned for that next wave in a way no other non-European country is. Canadian companies can now bid on European contracts from inside the system. Canadian engineers are joining working groups designing next-generation weapons from the ground floor. Canadian requirements will be integrated from the start. The submarine project is the test case. If it succeeds, and right now there's every reason to believe it will, the template expands. Fighter jets, missiles, integrated cyber systems, all developed with European partners instead of American ones. Over a decade, the cumulative shift in procurement, in industrial capacity, in strategic alignment, it compounds. And now we come back to the central irony of this entire story. Trump's strategy toward Canada was built on a single theory: pressure creates compliance. Apply enough economic threat, tariffs, trade restrictions, even rhetorical challenges to Canadian sovereignty, and Canada would fall in line, would prioritize the American relationship above all alternatives, would remain, as it always had, Washington's most reliable, most predictable ally. The opposite happened. Every threat accelerated Canada's search for alternatives. Every act of pressure made Canadian public and political will for diversification stronger, not weaker. The tariffs pushed Canada toward trade agreements with China and Europe. The sovereignty provocations pushed Canada toward Arctic infrastructure investment that bypasses American ports. And the defense pressure, the implication that American military cooperation was conditional on Canadian political compliance, pushed Canada directly into a 150 billion euro European weapons program that locks American contractors out entirely. Trump wanted leverage, he got Canadian independence. He wanted submission, he got strategic defiance. He wanted Canada more dependent on the United States. He got Canada inside the European tent, which is the exact phrase Defense Minister McGuinty used publicly. We have been allowed to step inside the European Union tent, allowed to participate like no other non-European state. Washington's pressure produced the outcome Washington most wanted to prevent. And here's what makes this truly durable. This isn't a single treaty that a future Canadian government easily reverses. This is procurement. This is contracts signed with European shipbuilders. This is Canadian engineers trained in French and German facilities. This is industrial capacity built into Canadian shipyards. This is supply chains reoriented over years. The realignment isn't a policy position. It's infrastructure. The era of Canada as the America's guaranteed, unquestioning defense customer is over. Not because Canada wants confrontation with the United States, because Trump made unconditional partnership impossible, and Canada decided that building alternatives was more rational than hoping American reliability would return. Security action for Europe is the result. 150 billion euros. Canadian companies on European contracts. Canadian submarines built with French and German technology. Canadian cyber systems integrated into European networks. All of it without American involvement. All of it proving that NATO allies can build serious military capability without American contractors. And all of it just getting started.